And welcome back. I'm your instructor, Domiko L. Cunningham, and we are still looking at our Vertigo Galette here inside of Maya 2015. So in our last video, we talked about how to be able to use the approximation editor to get our polygonal surfaces to render out with a smooth look. So in this video, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about how to use and set up some of the things in here to get a decent render out of this this particular model. So this model is not done. It's not completely 100% done. There are some other elements to still model for the interior cockpit of this vehicle, but I wanted to be before we got to the additional modeling stuff. I wanted to be able to look at how to get a good render out of this. So one of the first things, I want to make sure that I'm using Mental Ray to render with. Mental Ray is not the default renderer for Maya, but it is in there. And if Mental Ray is not loaded for you, you can go and load Mental Ray up. And I'll show you how to load up Mental Ray if it's not currently loaded for you. To load Mental Ray, we're going to go to Window, Settings and Preferences, and go to Plugin Manager. Down in Plugin Manager, if I go down and I look in here and I'm looking for this Maya to mr.mll, this is the Maya to Mental Ray MLL. Make sure that's loaded, and then make sure it's auto-loaded, and just leave it that way, and that's fine. All right. Once you've done that, you've got Mental Ray loaded up. So to make sure Mental Ray is the active renderer, we want to open up our render settings. And we want to say render using, and we want to choose Mental Ray as the renderer that we use. Alright, so Mental Ray is the one we use. Now some settings in here for Mental Ray. I want to actually enable color management. And I'm going to leave this the default input profile as my sRGB, but I want to output a linear RGB file. Now we'll talk about what that linear and that sRGB is in a little bit more detail in another video. But for right now, just know that we want to enable color management and sRGB and linear RGB. Now, here for file output, we want to change our file output to something that's going to be uncompressed and something that we can work with in a linear format. One that I find particularly useful is the OpenEXR file type. OpenEXR was developed by ILM, and it is an open, kind of more so an open source file format, which is the OpenEXR files are really good because they understand how to properly deal with this linear sRGB data, and they're also compressible, and when they do compress, they still keep a high level of quality to them, even though they're compressing some stuff in there. The compression is not the exact same as a JPEG compression, where JPEG compression you're losing a lot of things. With the OpenEXR compression, you're still holding on to a lot of that information that's inside that file. So for file output, everything is set. I'm going to close that down. And then renderable cameras. I do have a camera 1 inside of my Maya file, so I'm going to set my renderable camera to camera 1. And down here for image size, right now it's set to HD 720. I'm going to leave it on that for right now, but my final output is going to be 1080. I want to output this thing in the end to 1080p. So right now we're going to export it out to 720, just for testing purposes. Now the last thing I want to look in here inside of my Common tab is down here underneath the render options. Underneath render options, you'll see there's a checkbox that says Enable Default Light. I'm going to uncheck that because we're going to be using Final Gather as well as a little bit of image-based lighting to light our scene, and we're not going to be using lights for this particular scene. So to make sure that Mental Ray deactivates the default light that's already in Maya, I want to make sure that I just uncheck Enable Default Light. So that's what we want right there. The next place I want to hop over to is over into, let's see where we're at. So over here into my Quality tab. So my Quality tab right now, my sampling is set to Sampling Unified Sampling 0.75. I'm going to leave that for right now. And then my sample options, you can see I have a Gaussian filter and it's set to 4x4. I'm going to leave that as well. Looking at my ray tracing, I don't have anything in there ray tracing yet, so none of those things are active. The last thing I want to look at inside of my quality though is right here for frame buffer. For frame buffer, I want to click on frame buffer and make sure that the data type of my frame buffer is going to be set to RGBA float 4 by 32 bit. The 4 by 32 bit gives me a high quality image out of my frame buffer. And if you don't know what your frame buffer is, then we've got bigger issues, right? Your frame buffer is basically the place where all of your graphics sit before they're displayed out to screen. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we're getting a really high quality image out of the frame buffer that we're getting displayed to us. So this particular data type understands the sRGB and the linear RGB, and it understands all those things, and it's also has an alpha channel in it as well. That's what the 32-bit's about, because 24-bit is just full color, and then 32-bit is full color plus alpha. So we've got a lot of data within that file. All right. So the other thing I want to look at in here is my indirect lighting. So indirect lighting, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to use the physical sun and sky here inside of Mental Ray. So I'm going to click on physical sun and sky, excuse me, and it activates my physical sun and sky. You can see that now I have this mi_physical sky. I have a sun direction node in here. Right now I'm not going to make any changes to this. I'm going to leave it as is. So I'm going to hit OK. But one thing you will notice that when you turn on physical sun and sky, it also activates final gathering. And final gathering is a ray-based lighting method that works from the facing camera angle. So keep that in mind as well. So let's close this, and let's go set up some shaders here inside of Maya. So I've already got shaders set up, but I'm gonna actually get rid of all those shaders and show you how to set these up once again. So I'm gonna go Window, Rendering Editors, and open up my Hypershade. So here comes the almighty Hypershade. So as you can see, I've already got some materials in here. I've got a chrome, a tire material, glass material, MI car paint, and then well as the used background material that are all in here from when I first was setting this up. But I'm going to show you how to set these up yourself. Now I'm going to show you how to set the shaders up, but I'm not going to reapply brand new shaders because these shaders are already applied and they're already set up for me to start my rendering process. So to make a brand new shader, what I want to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go make sure I open up and I look at my nodes. So I want to use Mental Ray. So I'm going to use Mental Ray nodes. So right here is my Mental Ray, and there's my materials for Mental Ray. And you'll see what I've got here, and I used this before, is my MI car paint PHEN_X_passes. Now I can tell you, no matter, just rule of thumb, and this is something that I like to do, is when I'm doing my render, I always use if I'm using Mental Ray, I'll always use the passes version of the shader that I'm building. And there's a simple reason for that, is that if you're going to export out passes, so if you're going to do an ambient occlusion pass, a shadow pass, a normal map pass, specularity, if you're going to do those things as passes, then the only way to get these Mental Ray shaders to properly split and export the different composite layers to get a pass out of it is to use the passes version. These two guys are exactly the same. These MI car paint shaders are very identical, except that the passes one can be used to actually demultiply or uncomposite the final image coming out and give you shadow passes and all the passes individually. So just rule of thumb, I use the pass version, so just keep that in mind. So I can click on passes, and you can see right here for this shader, it's actually pretty simple. The shader I have a base color for it. I can change this base color to whatever I want. And I have a lit color, so wherever the light's going to fall is going to be this color right here. And then that's really kind of it for this shader. There's some other things in there I can set, like I can set the weight of my flake. I can set the scale of it. That's going to be something very important as As you start to get the scale set for your vehicle, you want to probably go down in scale. So you want to scale them down so that you have smaller ones, and then be able to set that stuff up. And then your reflection color in here is completely white. If you want to make your car a little bit dull, you can actually bring this down to a halfway point, or clicking on it, and you'll see right here, and this is a little trick, when you're looking in your color values and the color values are actually attached to something that should be a numerical value, you'll see that my hue and saturation are 0, but my value is 1. So if I took this right now and put it at, let's say, 0.5, so now my vehicle paint will only be half as reflective. So you can see it actually makes us fall down. So the color value changes how reflective this guy actually is. It's kind of cool, right? So that's my MI paint material. So these other materials in here are actually pretty easy to get to too. If I come in here and make a MI underscore material underscore X underscore passes, click on this, you can see that I get a basic Maya material. Now, to be able to get this chrome, this tire, and this glass material, it's pretty simple. All I want to do is just make a standard MIA material X passes, and when I have this shader active, I'm going to go to the attribute editor for the shader, and right here where it says presets, I'm going to left click on presets. When I left click on presets, you'll see it brings up chrome, copper, frosted glass, all these different types of pre-built or preset shaders. So if I want chrome, I can come in here and go over chrome, and I'm going to say replace. And by using replace, it's basically going to take the shader and it's going to become the chrome shader. If I do it at 50%, what it would do is take the chrome shader and the original shader and blend them at 50%. I don't want that. I just want to replace it. So now you can see I've got chrome. There's my chrome right there. So that's basically how I set up and got my shaders. That's pretty much it. Nothing too fancy. So I've gone through already and I have applied my shaders to my vehicle. If I come in here and go and look at this, I can see that my shaders are already on my vehicle. It's fine. It's great. I think the only one I need to change, and let's go back and make sure of it. I believe I need to change one of these guys, but it's not a big deal. I think I'm just going to change. Oh, there's my hypershade. So I think I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, I think this is on my car, but I'm not sure. Let's see if we can go in here and say select object with material. Okay, so that material is on my car. So if you ever wonder what material is on your actual model, if you right click on that shader and just say select objects with material, you'll see everything got selected. So that's telling me that all those body parts of the car are on. They are actually a part of that shader, or that shader is applied to them rather. So one other thing that I want to do is I want to have a way to be able to capture shadows on a ground plane, but I don't want the ground plane to be visible. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a plane, and this plane is only going to be for my car to sit on and be able to capture shadow information as the sun falls on this guy. So I'm going to drag this like this. Now I need to apply a special shader to this. The shader that I want to apply is my use background shader. And if you don't know where the use background shader lives at, then it's right here. If I go to my Maya, if I go in here to Maya, and I go look at shaders in here, you'll see I have this use background shader. So I'm just going to take this use background shader, middle mouse click, and drag that shader onto my plane. Now you'll see the plane disappears. That's fine. That's perfectly okay, because the use background shader is meant to be able to capture shadow but not show up in your render at all. So it's made to be see-through so that you can capture information that falls on it, but you don't capture the actual plane itself or anything else. So you can see right here I have a reflectivity setting for the use background shader. I don't want it to be reflective, so I'm going to turn the reflection down to 0, and reflection limit, do that to 0 as well because I don't really need it. I'm only using this use background shader as a mask to capture the shadow on. So I'm gonna zoom in at this point, and let's go back in here. I'm gonna make sure I change my camera, so I'm gonna go to panels, perspective, and make sure I get my camera 1. I'm gonna move camera 1 into position, kind of where I want it, like right about here. And the other thing I want to do is I want to come in here and go to view and go to camera settings, and I want to turn on my resolution gate because I want to see what my final render was going to look like. This is the framing that my render will have on it. So I'm going to render this really quick, and I'm going to pause the video while this is rendering so you don't have to sit here and wait. And we're back from that render, and you can see that right now my vehicle looks pretty okay. I need to go back and continue to work, and finish the interior cockpit. The sun is a little bit bright, like I can see the sun's kind of blowing out my paint here a little bit in here, but you got to remember, I don't have any lights inside of my scene except for the sunlight. I have the sunlight system active, and I also, so it's the sunlight in its final gather, basically. So let me go in and make some adjustments. I'm going to go open up my outliner, and you can see my render time was 1 minute on this. So I'm going to open my outliner, and I'm going to grab, and it should be in here, but it's not showing up. Let's see. Let's open up my lights. So there's my sun shape, and there's the intensity for it. And there's my physical sky. So on the physical sky, I want to turn this down a little bit. I'm going to go down to probably 0.5 to start off with. And let's keep a version of this, and I'm going to be right back. I'll render this again, and we'll keep that version, and we'll compare the two. So you can see in our second render here, we turned our physical sky, we turned the multiplier down to 0.5, and this is at 1, this is at 0.5, so I'm getting, my scene's not as blown out from my shader. Looks like my car shader was taking the biggest hit to that, but the highlights aren't as blown out, things are a little bit better in line with each other, and this render is starting to kind of come together. One of the last things I want to talk about with this render, though, is being able to use a background. So I'm going to click on use background. So let me go find a background very quickly. Let's go get a background, and let's see if we can find one in here. Yep. We're going to, actually, I think I have a background right in here that we can use, and I'm going to use an HDR background for this, HDRI background for this, which is a high dynamic range image. They're great to use if you can get your hands on them. You can find them sometimes online. A lot of times you'll have to probably pay for them or take them yourself. If you have a camera that's equipped to be able to take a file that has multiple exposures, you can take these on your own. It's just, they're really hard to be able to capture with just like a cell phone. Now you can use what we call LDRI, which are low dynamic range images, which are cell phone camera pics, things of that nature. But all in all, you'd be better off using an HDR image if you have access to them. One of the ones that's very easy to get a hold of. It's on the original Paul Divenbeck website. Is the one for the Coliseum, and this is a spherical globe HDR image. The nice thing about this is that I can use this inside of Maya. So I'm going to use this file. So right here where it says use background, I'm going to click on that and use background. Now what I want to do when I'm doing my use background, I want to use a mental ray shader or another plugin in here, not plugin, but another shader in here, which is, I want to make sure I find it. We need, there's a spherical background in here. Let's type it in. Let's actually, well, you know what? Let's actually look for this guy. We probably can use the environment. So I'm going to use mi underscore environment blur. So right here, you'll see I have an environment. I can click on this node. And now for this node, I'll get my regular file node from Maya. So there's my file node. And I'm going to click on the folder once again. And let's drag this in here. Let's see if we can, let's put this on the desktop. Let's actually put this on the desktop just so I can get to it really quick. So there's my HDR image on the desktop. Let's open it up. And I'm going to pause it one more time. We're going to render once again, and we'll be right back. So it looks like our render did not give us what we were looking for in that last render. So with adding a background to this, I'm not going to use the use background. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and actually turn on my image-based lighting. By doing that, it puts an environment sphere around my whole environment. And the nice thing about using the image-based lighting attributes, even though I'm not going to use the image-based lighting to actually generate any light, I'm just going to use it to be able to help map reflections onto the car paint. So I can set this to spherical because my file is spherical. And right here for image name, I'm going to click on my folder and go get my image. And you can see it drops my image right in the background. And my use background right here, my plane is sitting right there. So when I go in here and render, let's render this one more time. And we'll just let it go because it's going to take about a minute to render this out anyway. So we'll let it go. And the render for this, what's going to be nice about this is that one, it will use the physical sun and sky along with Final Gather to generate most of my light. By using the image-based lighting node, the mental ray IBL shape, what I'm able actually to do is to take that HDR image, put it into the background, and be able to kind of do a little bit of compositing because I had a plane that has used background attached to it. It's going to capture the shadows, but what's going to be nice is it's going to look like those shadows are being applied to the image that's used in the background, and you'll see that once this render is actually done. One thing that we're not doing with this image is we're not emitting any light from it. So you can see right here where it says light emission. No, I don't have this checked, so there's no light coming out of the image-based lighting right now. And the same thing for photons. There's no photons being generated from the image-based lighting. I'm basically only using that image-based light for reflections, to cast reflections into my metal and into my chrome, because we know working with metals that metals are only as strong visually as what they reflect in their environment. If your metal has nothing to reflect, then your metal's not going to look very, very strong, especially if you're using like a really shiny chrome or a really polished chrome or something of that nature, because they really want to be able to reflect the things around them in the world. If you have more matte finished metals, then it probably won't be as big of a deal to have a reflection globe around everything. But if you have really reflective surfaces like glass, metals, highly polished plastics, you really want to have something for those things to reflect. So let's give this a little bit more time to actually render, and we'll be right back once this, we'll unpause this and be right back once this finishes rendering. And as we can see in our final render here, that we've got some things working for us. We've got some of the stuff showing up in reflections in our car paint. We've got the chrome actually showing up light chrome now. My glass is in there. I still need to get the front glass and the cockpit area and everything else. But overall, I think this is a very successful render. When we go back in and add in some of our final touches, such as the turn signals and the inner body of the headlights and things of that nature, as well as the tail lights, this will be ready to slap and render and be good to show. So in our next video, we'll look at some of the things we can do to tune our render a little bit more and to get our final rendering of this piece. And by that next video, I hope to have all of the cockpit pieces actually finished, and we'll be able to get our final render together. Other than that, I will see you next time.